Hey, so I've had you on a few times now. Maybe you could just do a quick introduction.
Hey, I'm Paul Len. I have been on twice already. Um, I met Ciro in Philadelphia at one of the DeFi Philly meetups, and I've been kind of running a small community here since then called Blockspace. In addition, I don't want to call myself an OG, but definitely a 3, 4 year veteran degen in the DeFi space that has recently made the jump to coding and dabbling with Web3 as a builder. So happy to be here.
I haven't actually asked you about block space in a long time. So what happened? Can you tell us what it is and what your journey with that has been so far?
Sure. So we crowdfunded a co-working space via NFTs a couple months ago, and we essentially just got a space within a bigger co-working space where we get together and um, have happy hours, talk about crypto, help people set up whatever it is to basically help people learn about crypto. Um, it's a small group of us; it's maybe a dozen, but in the last couple of months, we had 3 monthly events that were pretty much packed house. Like I don't think we could have fit any more people than we had. So that was nice. And it's really encouraging to see the community growing. Definitely as the price of Bitcoin goes up, more people are interested and more people are seeking out this kind of community. And I'm happy to be able to kind of help new people on their journey to become, I guess, their own bank or whatever you want to call it. Obviously, some people are more interested in art and NFTs or just building or just holding Bitcoin or speculating in prices. But I'm always really excited when new people come into the space and they want to learn about DeFi.
What was the main motivation behind starting the space? I remember being in Philly and I worked from home personally. I really liked the idea. Unfortunately, like I moved and I will eventually go and see what you guys have been doing, but what drove you to taking the responsibility of starting a space? It's pretty difficult. Like there's a lot of logistics involved.
Yeah, so I gotta be honest, it was mostly selfish. I like the consistency of getting together and talking about current events in crypto. Otherwise, it's really easy when it's a bear market and Bitcoin price is down to whatever it is, to just kind of lose interest, stop following people on Twitter, stop reading articles, stop researching. And then you miss out on some awesome airdrops, like some of the airdrops we had recently. Like I'm not super plugged into the Solana ecosystem, but like I'm kicking myself for not doing more and not paying attention because the writing is usually on the wall with those things. And the Pith and the June what was the other one? The Jito airdrops like combined, even if you just had one sol staked and or traded, that's like 15 grand, right? Um, so all it takes is a couple of happy hours, hear about the right thing, and it could be a significant amount of money. I mean, 15 grand is not a life-changing amount of money, but if all you did was show up to a happy hour, heard about it, and then stake 1 ETH, a couple months down the line, you get a nice airdrop like that. It's definitely worth your. I mean, I unless you're a millionaire or a CEO, like I think it's worth anybody's time, right? Um, Not to mention just like the learning experience of it. So for me, it was very selfish. Like I want to be plugged in. I want something that keeps me consistently engaged. I also just like the idea of having a space and working around other people because, like you said, working from home can be challenging, can be distracting. So that was my main motivation. My secondary motivation was to just like introduce more people to crypto, to coding, to blockchain in general. And it's been going. Beginnings are always hard. It's definitely a lot of the same people that showed up in the first couple of months. But recently, it's been really encouraging seeing new faces and people like coming in here with very little knowledge and asking the right questions and getting the right advice. That makes me feel really good.
I want to go into the challenges of this process in a bit, but one thing you mentioned about being plugged in, I'm very plugged in, but I find myself like siloed in the Ethereum or EVM community. and I missed a lot of money because of it. Like that, there's a lot of these. Sometimes I buy these like meme stocks or meme coins, and I've done pretty good on them last year. But I look at things on Solana. Like recently, there was another dog coin on Solana, and I've been seeing it for weeks. And I just kind of ignored it, and it's thousands up. It's very discouraging to know that like you could have at least a little bit of an idea, but without somebody guiding you through it, you probably won't end up doing it. So I like that you mentioned that. Would you be able to like walk me through some of the challenges that you've had? I also started my own meetup about a year and a half ago here where I'm living now, and I have like 1,500 members on the app, and maybe like 20 to 50 people show up per meeting. But I personally, like, besides starting it and maybe being there sometimes, I kind of gave the responsibility out to other people. I just didn't want to handle it. Maybe I can hear a bit about your challenges and see what other people around me are going through.
Yeah, so I think the main challenge was that I was being ambitious about it. I really wanted our own space, so like an office, like a more professional setting, rather than just like getting together at a bar and whipping out your laptops. Which, especially when you're dealing with money and ledgers and Bitcoin in general, like it almost doesn't feel safe, right? You don't want like some random people coming up to you and like seeing that you're moving a whole bunch of money around and maybe doing like what's it called, a hammer attack, right? So I really wanted like a private space, like an office where it's a little bit more professional, a little bit more safe, and people could actually bring their laptops, bring their ledgers, and try to do stuff on chain. Um, and with that, it's like you need to put down a deposit, you need to have enough monthly like contributions to pay the rent. So that was definitely the biggest challenge, to actually get people kind of excited and not just say that like, oh, I'm excited, but also um, buy that NFT and help me crowdfund it. That took a while. Now that we got going, I mean, I've still definitely kind of filled the gap in the monthly rent, but I get a lot of value out of being here, and I get a lot of pleasure out of providing the space to maybe other people who only use it occasionally and maybe not necessarily want to pay every month. Um, and then beyond that, it's just like sometimes it's a little bit like herding cats, right? Like you can put on a great event, and it's just like getting people to hear about it, or getting people to actually make the trip down here and meet up is sometimes challenging.
So you went through with the crowdfunding strategy of like having them buy NFTs, and then those NFTs are your membership. Are you doing the like? Did you do enough crowdfunding initially to cover a few months or a year in advance, or was your strategy right now more like every month you try to collect enough to keep it going?
So we collected enough for 3 months, almost 3 months, I think. Uh, and then once the 3 months were up, some people were like, I really don't use the space enough. Like, I don't think I'm going to like sign up on a monthly basis. Others did, and that like probably the first month after the first 3 months was the toughest, where I kind of had to make a decision, like, hey, that am I gonna re-sign this lease again for another 3 months, because the space actually gave me that option. But I knew that I'm taking on kind of a risk, right? Like if more people drop off or people don't sign up for the monthly membership, then I'm on the hook for the full amount. But luckily there's some good people in Philly that helped me make this happen. And with time, more people signed up, and I think we're in an okay place now going forward. And I really hope that we keep it going.
Have you seen a significant change in the environment since maybe 2 years ago? Because I remember like the 2021, obviously everybody was super hyped about things, and there were a lot of people showing up to those meetings, and eventually it kind of cooled down once the market turned around. Have you seen like a recovery?
It's hard to compare. I think what we're doing here I think it's a bigger obstacle for people, because just going to a bar for, where anybody could kind of walk in and participate, or is probably easier for people. Going into like an office space where maybe they don't know anyone, they just heard about this meetup online, is probably like tougher for a first time person. So it's not comparing apples to apples, like the with the meetups that we used to go to together. But that being said, like I think there's definitely less people interested right now than there were like in 2021, right? I mean, 2021 when like crypto just went up parabolically, like everybody wanted to learn about it. Everybody wanted to hear about it. People were seeking out these events like crazy. It's definitely cooled off now, but I could even say like between November, I guess, when the mini rally started till now, there's been a significant increase in interest.
It's a shame that it really has to do with like the market conditions because there's a lot of interesting people in this space and it attracts it attracts interesting people in my opinion, but having the excitement about it tied to the prices is a bit of a shame. I've been really struggling with this, so I started like my meetup and I wanted to I never really had the intention of just sitting in bars. I really don't like that. I mean, I enjoy sitting in bars. I just don't like that being my only social contact with people. I'd rather meet people on different terms. So maybe we educate, get an education together or like build something together. And I've found it hard to convert people from one space to another. I think maybe I just went too far down the social, event route to move it now. And I commend you for what you're doing. I think maybe you started it off properly. Compared to me, I've just had a really hard time getting that conversion happening. Um, I wanna, I don't want to jump around before I let you have a word. So if you have anything to say, let me know.
Nah, it's definitely been it hasn't been super easy to get this started. But I'm very appreciative of everyone that supported the idea. And I really hope that with time it's actually going to become much bigger than it is now, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
Me as well. I hope I can get to Philly soon and get a day to see what's been happening there. In regards to your learning process, I don't think we mentioned it last time we were on a call, but doing this podcast, you've been learning to code. I want to hear a bit about your journey. What made you like double down on it? I know you've been wanting to do so for a while. What was like the final trigger that made you do it consistently?
So honestly, the final trigger has been ChatGPT. Um, I had a job interview where I needed to, I guess, like do some stuff in Python. And I have some basic programming background. Like I took a class in high school, I took a high class in college. Like I've built websites in the past, like with WordPress, which isn't really coding, but like, there's a little bit of PHP that like you pick up along the way just to run your website, right? Um, so once I had to learn Python a little bit to just like basically create visuals for data. And I started plugging things into ChatGPT, and it was just so easy. I mean, like, hey, here's the Excel file, the data. I want to make a bar graph or whatever, like using Python, and it just like comes out. You copy and paste, and it works. And it's like, oh shit. And then I started using Cursor, which is a really cool piece of software that has GBT built into basically a clone of VS Code. And so you can tag files, you can tag functions, and then ask direct questions to GBT. You can even like provide docs for whatever it is that you build, like whatever stack you're in. Um, and that really made it so that I can go into so at the time I had an existing app that like I had to basically spend a lot of money to build. We outsourced all the development because I was nowhere near ready to do that. But things started breaking in the app, and it wasn't bringing in enough money to really have like a developer on staff. So what happened was I needed to fix something in there. Like my PayPal integration just stopped working, and so I couldn't get paid. Which that's the most important thing about this app. Like if I can't get paid, it's useless. And I looked at the developers and like again to engage with someone, it's like minimum $2,000 just to get them to like review what the issue is and like provide an estimate or maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but like all in it would be probably 2 grand to fix this minor issue. Instead, what I did is I basically plugged in the error that I got and like the files that I thought were related to the error into ChatGPT, and like half an hour later, without knowing any Rails, honestly, never really looking at Rails code before in my life, like I fixed the issue and like deployed it live and it worked. And I'm like, wow, what else can I do? And then initially, like it was pretty bad initially, like where I would try to maybe build a new function or fix something else in a website where I didn't really know Rails at all. But I was just like copy and pasting error messages and like getting the code out of GBT and like putting in the what I thought were appropriate places. And that resulted in some really, really bad code, but code that worked. And like that was good enough for me at the time. Um, so it's just incredible what this thing can do, in my opinion. And as I get like more into it, I started to understand the code because like I'm copy and pasting, I'm obviously reading through it, like I'm changing certain things. And then I just started writing the code on my own. And like a lot of the times I'll just get help with syntax from GPT. I got a lot better at prompting it, right? Like using certain descriptive words like, hey, I'm really concerned about security of this thing, like write this function to make it as secure as possible, or like maybe write this function with as little lines of code as possible. And then I would get into like, hey, should this be its own function, or is it okay that this function does two things? Like what parameters should I be passing? Like, is it okay to pass all these parameters, or should they be, pulled with a different method? Like it became like a learning experience in of itself. And then I saw my code getting better and better and me relying on GBT less and less until it got to the point where I was just kind of like relying on it for syntax. Like I would just write a really shitty function and I was just like, hey, fix the syntax for me. And it would work. And that's kind of how I got into it. And, with repetition, like, yeah.
A lot of people, a, a lot of people think that, at least the people that have been programming for a while or doing this as a job, specifically like web developers, have a feeling that it's gonna, take them out of a job, like take their job away from them. This is the first time I've ever heard somebody saying that they actually got into coding like more seriously or professionally after they use GPT. So thanks for sharing that. I found it to be a really great tool. I struggle with it in a lot of ways. Maybe I have too much expectations for it. I would love for it to understand more context and to be able to do things more independently. Especially when I'm dealing with something that's very well documented, it seems to, it can do whatever I ask it to do. But whenever I work with something a lot more obscure, it's playing a guessing game, and then
Have you ever used
it
Cursor?
becomes a waste of
Let me
time
just
for me.
stop you for a second.
Um, what what do you think? I have not. So I
Yes,
have,
so I used that
so I
initially.
gotta, are you familiar
And
with
in
GitHub
my,
Copilot?
humble opinion, I think Cursor is just like a lot more helpful.
So here's what happened. I got a message, I got an email from GitHub and they gave me a lifetime Copilot subscription for free. Then they started adding in all of these plugins to VS Code. So now, for example, I have ChatGPT plugged into the VS Code, so I can actually just directly communicate with it. And it also has context around the entire directory. So
Okay.
let's say it does a lot of what Cursor does. And the only reason I haven't made the switch is because up until now, from what I've tested, it seems like GPT is caught, like, what's it called? Copilot has caught up to Cursor. I think Cursor is a lot more attractive if you don't have all of these plugins already set up. There's a big reason for you to take the leap off of VS Code and into Cursor. If you don't have the plugins and the subscriptions and all of that, thankfully for me, after what I've tested, it seems like it's doing almost everything. And
Okay.
I've also noticed that I've tapered off of GPT lately. When it first came out, I was using it every single day, and now I barely go on there once a week whenever I hit something super challenging. Um, I'm afraid it's gonna take away my edge. Like, if I start relying on it for too many things, I could just stop. Like, I could just unlearn how to code, if that makes sense.
No, it definitely does make sense. I definitely, looking back at it now, when I initially started using it, I mean, the code it was producing was awful. I didn't necessarily know that, right? Because I didn't have much of a reference point. Um, like like my expectation was just like make it work. Like I want to build this function, like this whatever feature in my app. If you could make it work, I don't care what the code looks like. But that started to catch up with me with time. So like just all these useless use effects that in React that could have been completely avoided, but like it just became a mess. So I know what you mean.
You have you have a great opportunity, by the way. So I started React before the hooks were really a thing. I think they were in development at that point. I was using it back when there was like classes and you had all of these like
Yes,
state effects. They're basically they're the same thing. They're just abstracted in the hooks. Now there's something called React Query
yes.
that does what use effect tries to do.
Yeah,
Have
so
you
I've
heard of it?
actually,
Have
so
you
I
tried it
just
out?
recently kind of went through the docs and built a little app using TanStack, which uses React Query. And like that's where like ChatGPT kind of like, I think this is, I don't want to say like new because it probably isn't like a relatively new app, a new stack or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what it is. Um, but GPT was just getting lost. It kept using like the wrong docs. It was trying to give me the functions to use like 10 stack V3 or V4, but I was like using V5 and none of it was working. And so like I had to literally go read the docs, like watch a video on somebody like showing how this works, and then just like writing the code myself. And it took me a while to like get GPT to even like help with the syntax at that point. Like I really had to like learn it myself and like do it myself because every single time I would send it to GBT, I'm like, no, that's not it. That's wrong. And like, I have to write it myself. So that's like, it's funny that you mentioned it because that's like the last 2 weeks probably. Like I've just did so much React query, like just learning and finding different ways to use it. Um, and also seems to be very popular with Web3, right? Like you can link a lot of the like blockchain queries with using TanStack, I believe. Like Scaffold ETH is mostly built on TanStack and like React Query, right?
Yeah, and I think the reason I said it's a really good opportunity for you specifically is I find it really difficult now to get out of my like so I started React when it was cl classes and now it's hooks and now I'm like really I've been using the hooks for years professionally and it just feels difficult to do things differently. And I think because you've just gotten a lot more serious about it recently, you have the opportunity to like learn the right way of doing things and not get stuck in your ways. There, this is getting like super nerdy, but it's fine. I mean, I feel like most of the people listening are probably people I work with, and React is like a uh, very broken system at this point. And as much as you can rely on something else, it's probably better. You chose Rails and React for the app. Can we talk a bit about the application that you've been building?
Sure. So I come from my first business was basically a relocation company in New York City, and I did that for 10 years. And like about year eight, I was getting pretty frustrated and bored of it. I felt like I was hitting a ceiling. It was difficult to scale. Like, I mean, I had 25 employees and like going from 25 to 100 like means really reorganizing and relying on other managers to manage the people correctly. Being in New York City, it's like very litigious. So like people are trying to sue you every step of the way. Like you have to make sure that all the forms with your employees are signed, all the contracts are done right. So even if you're busy and you just like need a couple guys to fill in, like you still have to make sure that you're doing all the legal things right. Otherwise, it could really come back to haunt you. And like I just didn't want to deal with that. So I built this app using basically outsourcing all the development work, which is a marketplace to connect moving companies with customers. That's like a little bit of a background. The app did okay. It still does. It still is being used. Like people do like it. I don't think the marketing was ever really up to like what it needed, so it never really took off. Um, but now I'm building kind of a new version of it, and I'm building it myself. I'm making it the way I want it to. I feel like some of the stuff where like I was coming up with the ideas and the user interface, but the developers were building it out, and me not having that much experience building apps in the first place, like the end product wasn't as great as it could have been. So now I'm trying to do it myself and build it like to the expectations that I had for it. So that's like a little bit of a background on what that app is. As I've been learning, React and React Query and all these other things, I've kind of built mini apps just to learn how these things work before I try to implement it in my kind of like live version of the app that I'm building. I've also done a hackathon recently, which was a really great learning experience. It really forced me to kind of finish like a blockchain project and not just say like, oh yeah, we have the smart contracts and like here's this like really crappy interface that you can actually like deposit some USDC and take it out. Like, oh, it's great. Like I've actually built like a front end that connects to the smart contract and deployed it on a test net. And it was really like rewarding to see something through. That being said, something still didn't work. So like, I don't know how great it was, but um, yeah, I guess that was a really long-winded way to answer your question, but the main app that I'm working on is this kind of moving marketplace.
Cool. Have you tried anything like Leet Code? I've been grinding Leet Code for a while and it's been a very good experience. Are you familiar with it at all?
You showed it to me. I haven't tried it. I feel like I'm still learning a lot on my own, and I think I really just like prefer to learn things out of necessity, if you will. So if something doesn't React hooks, and somebody told me about React Query and 10 stack, and I'm like, oh, this would really solve a lot of these problems I'm having. So let me learn that. And then it's just thinking about it from a perspective of what I need my app to do, and like looking into those parts of the docs and like getting that to work. Um, just it feels more rewarding and like I don't know, more focused rather than just like I would definitely benefit from an overall uh, like lead code that you showed me, but it's just harder to sit down and be consistent about it, especially since this isn't like my primary job, right? Like I'm not getting paid to build my own app. Like it's more like the goal that I have forces me to learn things along the way, which I'm okay with.
I've been a big I'm I tried to learn how to code like multiple times since I was a teenager and I failed every time. And what's really helped me is getting paid on the like getting paid to learn on the job. I think it gives me this huge motivation of like, okay, I could probably do this and I'm also going to get paid if I do it. So let's put all this time into researching it and trying things and, testing and making sure it works. And I've lately noticed that there's a type of skill that I don't pick up, that I don't learn. People like Mike Gen, I think he's a common friend of ours. He went to university and he managed to learn this skill that I'm talking about, because it is a lot more of an academic and like deliberate type of experience, which is how do you structure your data? How do you process your data? Is it a useful skill? Like in 99% of jobs, it is definitely not useful at all, but it teaches you how to think differently. So I've been just trying to get into that mind frame of, taking things a bit more seriously and trying to learn why things are a certain way and how to make things better and Leak Code has been very helpful with that. And it's also like a huge motivation boost for me. I'm shilling it because I think a lot of people would not only benefit from a code perspective, but also from like a thinking. Like it changes the way you think. You take time and you appreciate how did we get to the point where React does all the things that it does. Most people will never understand that because they don't need to. And I've been enjoying trying to go deeper into things. Here's a question for you. Would you do it as your main job if you had the opportunity? Like if there was a job that would hire you for at your current skill set, would you let go of something else and take that on?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer, and I've been kind of trying to figure that out for myself. Um, I think if it was a blockchain project that I can contribute just with my coding skills, I'll be much more inclined to say yes. Let me get the experience. Let me like hang around these people building a real blockchain application. I see a lot of value in that. If it was just like a regular Web2 like large corporation that needs something built, like I don't think I'm at that point in my life where I want to do that. Like I want to be a part of something bigger and like definitely my entire life I've been an entrepreneur, and it's difficult to just like give that up to have a job now. But life forces you to do certain things. Like maybe if I have a kid and my time is limited, and I realize like I don't have the passion or the time to do my own thing. Then at that point, like yeah, I'll take a job. Like I actually enjoy doing this stuff. Like I enjoy front end, I enjoy back end, I enjoy learning how to code. I think I'm just like, very quick to learn these things. I've realized, and that's very rewarding in of itself. So I potentially would, but I don't think I'm there yet. Like for now, I still do want to kind of grind and build something of my own.
It's funny that you had the insight to mention like if you have a kid. I've been working in blockchain at least since like 2022, almost full time now. Like right now I'm full time, and I've kind of have reversed my way of thinking. So I wanted to work in this space because I believe in it. I suffered from a lot of the issues that blockchain tries to solve. Like I'm always in a different country, so how do I maintain my finances? Some countries require this setup for you to have a bank, or you need this piece of paper that takes 6 months. And it helped me solve a lot of my problems and get to a point where I'm very comfortable and happy in my life. But I also noticed that it seems 90% of the projects in this space don't necessarily have a purpose. It's really hard to find a project that is actually useful on a mass scale for almost everybody. Like Binance, for example, that does that, right? Like Binance, millions of people use it. It's their entry point. They use it to invest and save their money. MetaMask is extremely important. Safe, you could argue that it's important, although it's a lot more niche. But I found myself working on things that I don't feel are at the end of the day meaningful, and I've been really considering just taking a leap into these big Web2 corporations, maybe in a year or two if things don't work out. And I would say I'm an entrepreneur. I don't really like working for people. I like working for myself. But I noticed that there's a big cap on how far you can go in this space. It's not big enough, and the skills that are required are not general enough that you can do something super impactful to the world, unless you're like one out of maybe millions of people, like a Vitalik, for example. And I don't mean that to discourage people. I feel like a lot of this stuff is very useful for the people that need to use it, but there's definitely a limit. Have you ever thought about that? Like, how do you feel like this space uh, is limitless in its potential?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. First of all, I strongly agree with your take that like 90% of the stuff that we're quote unquote building in blockchain is just freaking useless garbage. I mean, all these people are building and they're just copy pasting another dog coin. Like you're not really building anything, dude. Like but that's my personal opinion, and I'm sure a lot of people disagree. Um, but to move on to the second part of what you said, like be the change you want to be the one in a million. Aim high. If you don't see other people building meaningful, impactful tools in crypto, think of one and do it. And maybe there's no product market fit right now because crypto is still new and the user experience is not what it should be, and we've kind of been repeating the same stuff for like 2 years now. But the reality of it is like I personally believe that it will change. Maybe it'll take 2 years, maybe it'll take 5 years, maybe it'll take 7 years. Who knows? But I do think eventually people will start using this stuff a lot more without maybe even realizing they're behind the rails. It's actually crypto and blockchain. So build for the time when people will come and will be using this stuff. Like build something useful, right? Um, it's definitely possible. Like I know it is. Like even for me when I'm working on my moving app, a lot of the times I think um, I'm using PayPal and like people are still using credit cards to pay each other out there, even after they connect through my app. Like this is such a natural fit for crypto to help with those payments. And for me to get paid and maybe like even issue like a reward to my users that allows them to maybe vote with their token on certain decisions within the app, like decentralize this whole marketplace. Maybe we can even do something where like people who have completed moves through the marketplace and like maybe other moving companies could have some kind of a voting stake, and like in case there's a dispute between the merchant and the user, right? Like somebody's move doesn't go well, and they maybe each the moving company and the user could present their case, and like token holders could kind of decide like, hey, who's right, who's wrong in this case, right? Um, so there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with crypto. It's just like people aren't using it yet. So like I can build this most robust, beautiful app, but like right now, 99% of the people out there, they're not ready to pay with USDC for their move. They need to pay with a credit card. Like that's what they understand. That's what they know. They're not going to set up MetaMask and connect to my app using a wallet. Like unless you're already doing that, I'm not onboarding you using my moving app, or at least not right now. Um, and you know, that ties in with the first part. Like people need to stop fucking building dog coins and build something useful. So like more and more people are like inclined to get a wallet and see the value that like this crypto stuff isn't just about speculating and getting rich and Lambos. It's also about like getting rid of the parasites in the financial system and creating something that is more fair, something they could participate in, something that could be decentralized.
See, in that regard, I really do believe in the mission and the dream of it. Cutting out I work with PayPal and I've had a lot of issues with them, even in businesses that would, like just even a regular business. I was selling collectibles, like I was buying and selling collectibles for a while, and I have a lot of issues with it. It's horrible. They hold your money. People could just like do a chargeback. I struggled with it in a lot of different ways, and this is a safe business. When you start moving to businesses that are legal but not necessarily approved by our financial system, it gets even more complicated, and there's a lot more, leeching happening, and um, there's a huge imbalance of power between both the seller, the buyer, and the actual company itself that's providing these services. So the dream of it is there is okay, we want to give people more freedom and more access to tools without restricting how they can act. But then you run into some issues that I feel are quite critical, which is do most people need that? You have, for example, most people are comfortable with Apple Pay and they feel like this is, that's what they need. It works well for them and that's the end of it. And I look at things like Google Maps. This is an example that I use that thing every single day and it's such a critical point of my life. Like Maps, Google, or it doesn't matter if it's Apple. And this is an application that I think makes the world a lot better in general, right? It provides real value, it connects people, and it's super hard to replicate in the blockchain space. Like I feel like we're quite limited to the financial aspect of it. There's this one interesting use case of voting that I feel could be extended on. The voting space is very interesting for me because how do you ensure that a vote is genuine or that the right amount of people voted? There's no duplication. It's a shame to see that this has not been really applied yet in this space. We have Snapshot and everything, but there's critical organizations like governments that I don't know if they would ever let that in. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I think about that all the time. I think blockchain is a great fit for government because you need, like, recently somebody told me that corruption is the lack of transparency in government. And that like really clicked for me. Like transparency is really like the opposite of corruption. And so if you want less corrupt government, i.e. better government, you should have more transparency. And I think just blockchain is a great way to do that. It's just like it goes against the interests of those in power, so it's going to be very difficult to get there. Um, but yeah, when you have like city of Philadelphia, right? It spends a certain amount of money on X, Y, and Z, but like I wouldn't even know where to go to look to like I think it's public record probably like how much money that Philadelphia spent on road repairs and like which companies it paid to and for which roads. Um, but like I wouldn't even know where to start like looking at this stuff and like what to make of it. Whereas if it's on the blockchain, like somebody could create an app where you can see this much money has was sent to this company for these blocks and like create a link to Google Maps for before and after and like let the citizens decide if that was a good use of the money or like which companies are doing well and like aren't like overcharging for their projects. Um, like I think it would be it's like a utopian view, and it would be awesome. Um, I don't know how to get there. I don't have all the answers, but I'm with you 100%.
There are people within our governments. I used to be really jaded on governments in general, but now that I had a kid recently and we went to the hospital and we did the birth for free in Europe, and there's been so much support from the government that I've lost a bit of that, hopelessness towards it. And I met people in Philadelphia, I won't name names, that are in the government that are trying to push this stuff forward, but there are a few key players that it's a monopoly of power. If you have this aspect of transparency, they might not have as much control and power as they used to. And then you end up with the issue of like, all right, how do you convince them to let go of this, like stop gatekeeping and start integrating with things that make it clearer where things are going. I think in general, like the same problem that PayPal and banks go through, which is this insanely, like it is a simple service, but there's so much roadblocks and complications and obscurity. That would be solvable by blockchains, but you have to get people to agree to it, and I think that's where it's a big social problem, much more than it is a technological problem. Uh, I want to I want to talk to you about chess for a bit. So, I've been getting into playing chess a bit more. I find it to be a very fun game. It's not boring. Like I've played a lot of video games, and after a few hours, they get boring. You have a pretty good score. I mean, you probably have a better score than 90% of players. When did you get into chess? Why do you still play it? And yeah, we'll go from there.
That's a funny story. Why I got into chess is because when I was a little kid, like probably 7 or 8 years old, I was very, very hyperactive. And so like I was always like coming home with a bloody nose, or like I fell off a tree, or like got into a fight with a bigger kid, or something silly. Like I was just always kind of like quote unquote in trouble. I mean, really, I was just being like an active kid. And so my parents were like, what do we do about this? And my mom figured that like she could sign me up for chess and nothing could possibly happen, right? Like it's gonna calm him down. Coincidentally, like 3 weeks after I started going to a chess club, I got into like a shoving match and like I cracked my head open. I was at the chess club, which is kind of ironic. But that's how I got into it. I was a very little kid, and then like there was a lot of local like little tournaments, so like I got to travel a little bit with my parents, and it was like a thing to do, and it was fun. And the kids pick up chess really, really quickly. Like there's just something about it, that, like that young brain, like just kind of like similar to language, where like a 7-year old can go to a different country and like learn the language in like a couple of weeks, and you don't even like how did that happen? Chess is kind of similar. Like even now, I've played like kind of little kids who are just like so incredible at chess. Like I like they can't probably write very well, but like they're good at chess. It's incredible. So that's how I got into it, and it's just kind of something that stuck with me. I think every couple of years I probably go back to it, and just when I'm waiting in line for something, I'll start a chess game on my phone and go, just roll with it.
Do you feel like it's kind of shaped the way you strategize about things? I really feel like there is a connection between playing chess and strategic thinking and like long-term thinking as well and pattern recognition. And I don't really know if it's something that's transferable. Like, is it a skill that can affect your life in business and relationships? Or is it just like a game? Like, am I looking too much into it? I think this is because a lot of people associate being good at chess with intelligence. And while I think part of that is true, maybe intelligent people will try to be competitive. I don't know if it's an intelligence thing or if it's just like a habit. What are your thoughts on it now that you've been probably playing this for like 20 plus years?
Yeah, probably like 20, almost 30 years at this point. So I don't think chess skill itself is like transferable to anything else. Like I don't think being good at chess and like strategizing on chess could make you like good strategizing at a company or like even a different game, to be honest. However, I do think if you are good at learning, you're going to be good at chess, like the pattern recognition, right? Like being able to quickly like just get a piece of advice in chess and be able to remember it and apply it to future games is is that's maybe a skill that's transferable, right? Like just taking advice and like understanding that like you can keep playing chess for years, and you're not going to get much better. You're going to hit a ceiling. You're going to kind of hit like maybe the 1200 LEO ceiling. And until you like kind of sit down and study the game to a degree, like learn some principles, learn the openings, like you can play a million games and you're just going to keep like you're just not going to get better. Um, and that's something that chess could teach you. You know, like take advice from other people. Don't stand on the shoulders of giants, right? Look at that game in a tournament where people who are really good are playing and like figure out why they need each and every single move. Like sit down and spend hours doing that. And that's going to make you a better chess player than playing 10,000 games without actually studying.
This is exactly what I was trying to say about Leak Code. I think this is like a perfect vehicle to get my message across about that. I've probably contributed to like 30 different projects that have active users. And I feel like my skill level was very capped at a certain, I could do use effects, I could build sites, I could maybe connect some services and like, but there's a cap that you hit because you need to actually sit down and study and learn patterns that other people have been through before. And it's not something that you would by yourself fall into. Like, for example, openings a lot. Like I was always playing openings randomly. I just do whatever. Like I knew maybe the scholar's mate, and but you don't catch anyone that's actually played any chess with that. And I think until I sat down and like learned, the king's what was it King's opening, where the Indian King and the four knights, or the London, and then I can start. I go from like a 400 to a 600, and I do maybe try to learn about how to finish a game. How to get a pawn to promote, and I think it's the same thing I was trying to explain earlier about leak code, is that these are patterns that I don't necessarily think you would just stumble your way into. You actually have to like sit down and like look at them and understand people that are better than you, at least at a certain thing, have already done this and they've put that knowledge out there so you can consume it and try to improve. So thanks for bringing that up. I hope I can convince at least one person to try some leak code as well.
I mean, I'm going to try it, sooner or later. I do see it a lot what you're saying. I had a really good programming teacher in high school. I signed up for this class, which was kind of random, but like I was interested in computers. I thought maybe that's what I want to do for a living at the time, and so I took this class, and he was really good. And like now that I'm like really learning how to code, like I still remember certain things that he told me, right? Like if you're writing the same line of code in two different places, like you're probably doing it wrong. Like just little things like that. That now that I'm getting good at this, I'm like, it's like connecting with me again. So yeah.
I'm happy to hear that. I want to ask you about what's in the future for you. What are you planning? And yeah, well, where do you see yourself going in the next year?
I'm a crazy person. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what's going to happen. I have a kind of a plan for the next 9 months for my app. I'm going to keep working on that. Working on block space on the side, working on some maybe hackathons on the side. I do still have a lot of crypto that I do, a lot of like side projects. So it's just like there's been a lot, and I'm just trying not to think about it too much, not to worry too much. Live my life one day at a time, get the most out of it, get good experiences, meet new people, and most importantly, just keep learning. You know, I'm just hoping that one day it will all come together into something great that I could put on the world and make it a better place.
I hear that. I will probably, yeah, I'm definitely gonna see you in Denver, so I'm looking forward to that. Are you gonna be hacking there?
Oh, awesome. Yeah, so we're kind of talking about doing a hackathon project. We don't have like anything that we picked yet. So I think they're supposed to announce the categories and stuff in the next week or two. Um, and once they do that, I think we're going to sit down and try to figure it out. I'll be there Wednesday to Sunday. And if you're also planning to hack, like I'm more than happy to do something remotely, like the week leading up to it, and then meet up in person.
Yeah, let's see what happens. I got my ticket. I got my where I'm staying, and I'm really looking forward to this event because last time I went, I just literally didn't have a plan, and I only managed to get into a few side events. At least this time, because I was, I was in a, I do things like whenever something is interesting to me, I just kind of jump into it without a plan. And I've been getting a bit better at planning. So I'm really excited to see what this one holds. Anyway, thank you so much for being here. I'm gonna probably, do another one with you next year, and we'll see what happens until then.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad we're doing this. I'm glad there's a record of what's happening in my brain. Like you ask good questions, thought-provoking questions. So I really appreciate being on. And let's talk soon, and I'll see you in Denver.
See you then. Thank you.